Hey guys, so this video is about ratio and proportions. So you might have covered this in Algebra 1, but by the end of this video, you're going to be able to set up and reduce a ratio and also solve a proportion. So this always has a geometry tilt to it. So the first thing we need to discuss, okay, is what the heck is ratio? Ratio is another word fraction. Okay, a proportion are two fractions equal to each other. Okay, so we're going to need that. Again, fraction just means that we're going to set up a fraction and then we're going to reduce it, and that's our answer. So the first example I have on this is in 2007, the Boston Red Sox baseball team won 96 games out of the 162 played. Okay, you're going to need to write a ratio for the number of games won to the total number of games played. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a fraction. Okay, now what number goes on top? Well, whatever came first goes on top. The number of games won. Okay, and that was 96. And then to the total number of games played. Well, total number of games is 162. But the trick with this is you got to reduce it. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 2. So I get 48 over 81. Well, I also know that both of those are divisible by 3. So now I'm going to divide by 3, and I'm going to get 16 over 27. Now, those aren't reducible. Done. Okay? Now, there is another trick to this if you have a blue calculator, a TI 30X2. There's a little button that will help you reduce. Oftentimes, some of these ratios aren't reducible. So, the other trick with this is when we have triangles, okay, and when we use those colons, and there's 3 things. This is what we call an extended ratio. Okay? So, what this means is that the ratio of the measures of angles in the triangle JHK is 2 to 3 to 4. So that translates to the picture of the 3 angles. And I know that there's some value that I can find that this is 2 times the value, this is 3 times the value, and this is 4 times the value. Okay? In that exact ratio. Okay? So how do I set that up? Well, the first thing I do is I have to remember that the angles of a triangle add up to 180. So I set up an equation. 2x plus 3x plus 4x equals 180. Now I add those together. So now I have x is 20. Is that the measure of the angles? No. Measure of the angles is when I take that and I plug it in. So 2 times 20 is 40. 3 times 20 is 60. 4 times 20 is 80. So that's how I set those up. So to review, okay, these next problems. In 2007, a Major League Baseball season, Alex Rodriguez hit 54 home runs and was at bat 583 times. What's the ratio of home runs to the number of times he was at bat? Well, number of home runs goes on top. Number of times at bat goes on bottom. And I'm done. Okay? Again, 182 girls in sophomore class of 305 students. What's the ratio of girls to total students? 182 over 305. I can tell you both of these can't be reduced. This is that extended ratio. Okay? Now the ratio of the sides. Now I'm not talking angles, I'm talking sides. Well, the first thing you do is you draw a triangle. Okay? And the sides of the triangle are 8 to 15 to 17. Which means one side is going to be 8x, another side is going to be 15x, and another side is going to be 17. And it has a perimeter of 480 inches. 480 perimeter. Well, perimeter, I have to know, is when I add all those sides together. So I can create an equation, 8x plus 15x plus 17x equals 480. Well, then I add my x's together, comes 40x equals 480, and then I divide by 40, and I get 12. So now all I have to do is plug it back in. Okay? So I plug it back in, 8 times 12, that's 96 inches. 15 times 12 is So 15 times 12 is 180 inches, and 17 times 12 is 204 inches. And I would set the same thing up, only now it gives me the 3 angles. So I would, again, 7x, 9x, and 20x. I would set up the equation and solve. When you solve, I'll tell you that x becomes 5. And I want to see what equation you set up. So come in next class and make sure that you show me what equation you set up. And then you can find that the angle measures are 35, 45, and 100. Okay? So all I want you to do is set up that equation and make sure that you guys know how to solve for x. The next side is all about proportions. Now you might remember this from previous topics taught, but a proportion are 2 fractions that are equal to each other. The way you solve is you cross multiply. So you would do 9 times x, which is 9x, and you would do 16 times 27, and you get 432. Now, to solve that, divide by 9, you get 48. Okay? Now, oftentimes proportions deal with word problems. So, going through this, Mayor Hernandez conducted a random survey of 200 voters and found that 135 approve of the job she's doing. If there are 48,000 voters in Mayor Hernandez's town, predict the total number of voters who approve of the job she's doing. So your job, the question that you are going to be asked, is predict the total number of voters who approve. Okay? I don't care what they approve of. Okay? I also don't care that it was Mayor Hernandez, and if it was a random survey. The things I care about are that there were 200 voters, and of those 200, 135 approve. I also know, okay, I can cross out of the job she's doing, okay, that there are a total number of 48,000 1,000 voters. And again, I don't care about in Mayor Hernandez's town. So there are two things I'm talking about. I'm talking about voters, and I'm talking about who approve. So I'm going to set up a proportion. And what I'm going to do as a proportion, I'm going to put the amount that approve over the amount of voters. Okay? So just looking in this top sentence here, I know 200 voters, voters goes on the bottom, and that 135 approve. Cool. Okay? That has to equal or be proportionate to 48,000 voters. Well, voters goes on bottom. Okay? Oh, I don't know how many approve out of that. That's what the question is asking. And if that's what the question is asking, that's where my x goes. So now I cross multiply and I solve. So I would do 200 times x, which is 200x, equals 135 times 48,000 is a very long number. $6,480,000 people. So now I divide by 200 on both sides, and I get that x equals 32,400. So, if she was predicting that there would be 32,400 people that approve of the job she's doing. Okay, so that's how you set up and solve a proportion. The next ones are again solving proportions. Okay, so again cross multiply. In this case, 1x equals 56, and I'm done. 1x really just means 56. Here, I would cross multiply. 8y equals 72. Divide by 8. Y equals 9. What I want to highlight are problems like this. Okay. Now you notice that it's x plus x plus. So when I cross multiply, I just don't multiply the 10 times the x. Now I multiply the 10 times the x and the 22. Oftentimes, if I write it out like this, students notice that this is really the distributive property. And the distributive property happens whenever I have a plus sign. So 10x plus 220. And I would do the same thing over here. 30 times x plus 2. And that would be 30x plus 60. I again combine my x's. When they're on opposite sides, I would subtract. 220 equals 20x plus 60. I subtract 60. And then I divide by 20. X becomes 8. Okay, so that's how I set up and solve proportions. Now, the next couple problems are going to be practice problems. They deal with decimals. Okay, remember whenever you have a plus sign or a minus sign, you're going to have to distribute. Here, you're setting up a ratio, and then you're figuring out the cost. Okay, so you're going to try to figure out how much for one DVD. That can be a proportion or a reduced ratio. Okay, this is going to be a proportion. Okay, and the next ones are practice problems. So please make sure you write down your questions. Okay, set up all the problems and make sure that you're showing me what you're thinking. Okay, next class we'll be reviewing this practice and moving further. Thank you for your attention.